From All Quiet on the Western Front, supervising sound editor Frank Kruse, who has previously worked on Rush, Cloud Atlas, Suspiria, and the Matrix Resurrections. Frank, this film is incredible, and it really captures, I think, the punishing and relentless nature of war, like a way I have not really seen before. I've read other interviews you describe trying to create the sound of the war machine of this war. It's such a huge undertaking. I guess, where did you start in trying to figure out how this would sound?
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, thank you for having me. Yeah, thanks for the compliments, really. Yeah, where did it all start? I mean, Edward Berger, the director, sent me a script pretty early on, which I was really happy about because, as you know, lots of us come into the into post like really late in the process. But this one, we had a really long kind of head start in terms of, wrapping your head around it, how to approach it. So, and I went in, to do a little bit of research about that era, and like trying to find, I had heard rumors about, probably like less than a handful of recordings that were available, but it was really like on wax cylinders, and probably two I could find, and they were obviously super lo-fi and didn't really get across any physicality of it all. And so I gave up on that pretty early, and instead did more or less research literature and articles about that time. And there's really very few, I found very little research going on about the soundscape of that time. And what I did find is an article mentioning letters of soldiers that wrote, especially of the terror of sound they experienced in the trenches at that time, because at some point it would be, hours and hours of constant barrage and bombardment, kind of as part of the mostly psychological warfare. Like the, same applies to the tanks and the flamethrowers and stuff like that. Technology that was pretty new and was mainly very efficient in terms of the military strategy and everything. It was mainly about getting into people's head and create fear and like destroy the morale of the troop if it wasn't already before, just because of the conditions and stuff. So, and those descriptions were very specific, like almost in a comical, how do you say, the descriptions in comic books where they try to kind of write down the character of a sound. And they gave all these bombs, like, and grenades, like nicknames and stuff like that. So that was all very fascinating, even down to details like describing the sound of decomposing bodies between the front lines, and, dying horses in the distance between, in the so-called no man's land where they couldn't be brought back and just left to die and stuff like that. Really horrific details. And yeah, and then pretty much the learning process was, because it was in the beginning, I thought, okay, we have to be super accurate. You have to find the original tanks and record the original tanks. It needs to be super authentic. But I found, reading from these letters, there's really no point in being like scientifically authentic, because in the end, the emotional reception, even being in the shoes of Paul Bäumer, the soldier, would be kind of always on an emotional basis. It wouldn't make sense to, why would we, make sure it's the exact same engine inside that tank we would be hearing? So instead, we decided to create the sounds to create more an emotional effect, instead of being that very tank coming down down the mud and stuff. So yeah. Did that answer your question a little bit? I don't know.
Yeah, no, that was great. I mean, like everything you said there really does make sense when you watch the film as well. How much of it were you able to then, I guess, how did you work with what they were capturing sound on the set versus like what you guys are doing like in post, and how did you kind of blend that and balance that?
That was really key. I mean, it was, I had early conversations with our production sound mixer, Victor Prazio. They shot it in the Czech Republic in an abandoned, not abandoned, but an old military, like, how do you say, airfield, like an exercise space, which was huge. And they, luckily for us, really, they pretty much built the trenches, and everything you see in camera is pretty much there. What you see, like the VFX, they add a little bit of background and, extend the field into the distance and stuff. But everything else you see when we got the first cut is pretty much done in camera, like the the close up grenade explosions, the dirt flying around, and bullet impacts. A lot of that was done in camera, so that was super inspiring when the picture came in. But much earlier before, because it was like at the maximum of COVID, one of those high peaks at that time, and I knew I wouldn't be allowed to go on set or travel there and record extra sound. So we had this like early conversation, and we made a big list of stuff that we would like to grab on set. And Victor was great because he basically did the same thing. So he was absolutely on the same page and had additional crew on set and took care of quieting down these metal spiked boots for the interior scenes and all that. So he was very, very well prepared, lucky for us. And he just grabbed whatever he could record on set, like tons of crowd recordings, just 100 extras running across the through the mud, falling down, screaming, the exhaustion, everyone with their lav mics still attached from the scenes. And Edward is really great about sound because he's one of the very few directors who loves doing wild tracks on set, believe it or not, even with 500 people waiting in the background. Like he and Victor, they just grabbed all 200 extras and made them redo stuff again just for sound and optimize microphone positions and stuff like that, position surround mics in the field. And plus he grabbed all the vehicles. So we were just blown away what came back from set, thanks to Edward, because he was on the same page from the beginning since we had talked about it. So that was really awesome. And then we grabbed like every possible SFX grenade that we could find on the actual production tracks in between the dialogue, and made a huge library from those and treated them further, and that became the base layer for the whole thing, basically. So of course there's a ton of designed elements in there as well, and treated and additional stuff, and lots of other layers, and even more crowd that we recorded in a field back in Berlin doing post. But it was amazing what they just brought back from set. And yeah, that was the key to it all, really.
That's incredible to hear it. I want to, we talk a lot about how, I mean, obviously like there's a cacophony of like like you mentioned, like all the machinery of the war and everything. I mean, obviously I think for a lot of people, one of the most powerful scenes is when Paul kills that French soldier in like a blown out crater or whatever. And the sound really drops off pretty much, or it's a totally different sound than we've experienced previously. And I just found that scene like truly heartbreaking. It's like one of the most heartbreaking scenes I've seen all year. It's a beautiful moment. Like, can you talk about how you guys discuss that and approach that sequence as well? And like I said, it just kind of blew me away.
Yeah, that was really heartbreaking, that sequence, for everyone who saw it for the first time. Was really, everyone's jaws just dropped about, it was pretty much on the performances and stuff. And as Edwards just told me the other day, and this, I didn't know this, that during one of the takes, he heard some weird sound on his headphones, and he kind of afterwards he was asking, what's going on? I have this weird kind of strange sound in my headphones. And it turns out that the camera operator actually broke out into tears while they were shooting the scene. So he was and this was kind of the similar effect the scene had on us when the first cut came in. And yeah, I mean, that scene is like the entire film, or the approach to the sound that we made was really about contrast between light and dark, loud and quiet. And we wanted to go to the pretty much explore the extremes, like get in some moments bring down all the surrounds, make it really mono and simple, and generally the approach about for the effects or special effects, like sound driven sequences, was really to keep it naturalistic always, and never go into the synthetic side of things and make it overly like droney and stuff like that. So it should always feel like a real place still, even though there are these extreme moments, the one you mentioned, when there's this kind of, we gradually drop out of the background battle, and the key was there to pretty much not make the audience notice it, or like only notice it almost at that point where after the French soldier is dead and Paul almost wakes up from this traumatic situation, looks up into the sky, and you have these ambience of birds, actually swifts, kind of come up. And the idea behind that was kind of to make it surreal, find an element that is surreal but still naturalistic. So we put these birds there, which is a super simple thing to do, obviously, in terms of the how it is done. But we deliberately picked swifts for this because they're not around in winter. They travel south in Europe, so it's kind of a metaphorical sound for it really felt right for this kind of dreamy wake up from this trauma, and carried this desire to just get out of this place for Paul. It kind of added to this kind of desperation, exhaustion, and complete, like, all the energy going out of him. So yeah, that was
we have to wrap up, but I want to ask you about that scene. One other thing is, like, you mentioned there, like, how you don't want it to, like, kind of like the audience is gradually gonna kind of like not realize that the sound is dropped, like sound is changing, right, and stuff. And I found that so true watching it. It's like you don't even realize, because you're so engrossed with what's happening, you don't even realize what's happening with, like, the sound, right? Like, and I think that's like a testament to your work in the film. But did you guys, like, was there a lot of trial and error there where you would drop it out? Like, how did you kind of modulate that part of it? Like, kind of like how you're going to trick me as a viewer into, like, not realizing what was happening, I guess. Maybe trick's not the right word, but you know what I mean?
It's really a very good crafted kind of transition between the battle and the windy and eerie atmosphere you left with after that, done by Lars Ginzer. I mean, we had done a lot of experimenting with Edward in my studio when we played him these sequences and tested a bunch of these ideas. Also, the hearing loss moment in the big battle scene when after the tanks attack and he sees his friend die, and then everything goes away, and we decided, we could have gone completely overboard with reverbs and you really push people over the cliff in terms of, kind of fancy, I would say fancy, designy sound effects, let's put it this way. But just deciding to make it very plain and simplistic, hearing his up close breath, and keep it super dry, just hear the trickling dirt kind of raining down on him, and that little cloud of fog that goes above him and stuff like that. So to make it really tell the story always from Paul's point of view, even though the film doesn't offer really kind of a straight on POV visual throughout the film. It was kind of, we tried to establish this kind of perspective, what would Paul feel? How's Paul doing? That was the whole idea. And then shifting like into Paul's shoes and back out, putting the audience into the shoes of an observer, documentary, kind of documentary style observer. So yeah, that was the main concept we try to follow.
It's incredible stuff. Frank Kruse, supervising sound editor for All Quiet on the Western Front. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.